It seems as though Matt LaFleur learned an awful lot from Bill Belichick about how to give non-answers about injuries. If only he could take a lesson in special teams, then we're getting somewhere. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, John Delray. Today, obviously previewing Packers versus Vikings, the Week 4 matchup at Lambeau Field. And this is going to be a very important, very tough divisional matchup for the Green Bay Packers. So we're going to take you through the injury report, go through offense, defense, who the Vikings are, and really just see if we can settle in what the Packers can do and how this is going to go. So let's start off with the injury report. Now, yeah, you might be noticing if you're looking at the visual side of things that is the Wednesday one. That's because no one's put out a Friday one yet. I must be recording a little bit too quick, but we do know is the actual designations. There just aren't the cute graphics yet to follow up. So let's start off with the Vikings. Officially, only one of those guys actually got a game designation, and that would be Ivan Pace Jr., their linebacker. He has been declared as out now with an ankle injury. As for every other name on that list since Wednesday, they're all good to go now. And that includes Kenny Clark's child, Garrett Bradbury. He worked his way up from a DNP. He now has no designation. Also includes Jordan Addison. That maybe is the biggest headliner of the group, as he is going to be returning now after 2 weeks of missing games. Also notable, Jonathan Bullard, another DNP earlier this week, now no designation. As for the Packers, out of that long list, there are 4 designations. Jordan Morgan, the first-round offensive lineman, he is out. Still no IR spot for him, but another, and we did expect this, another miss with that shoulder injury. We're going to get to that in a little bit more in just a second. The Packers might have to do a little bit of roster shifting here depending on how tomorrow goes. Carrington Valentine, he got hit with the doubtful tag. Little surprising considering that he did get in some limited practices this week, but still a DNP today on Friday, which probably dooms him. Then Jaire Alexander has officially gotten a questionable tag. Start of the week, as you can see there, again, that's Wednesdays, start of the week with just the quad listing. However, today he was downgraded from limited. Now today he didn't practice at all, and they added a groin declaration to his injury listing. And logic would seem to dictate, okay, to get in limiteds and then go to a DNP and add an injury probably doesn't bode well for the star corner. But there's a couple other things here. It is Friday, totally possible to hold a vet out for a lighter Friday practice and still have him play. The Vikings even did that with a couple of guys that they openly just rested today. And honestly, in spite of taking on that new injury tag today with the groin injury, he still only got the questionable declaration, not the doubtful one. So on that side of the logic train, it would seem to actually indicate a decent chance for Jaire. When asked about it, Matt LaFleur basically just said that there is reason to be concerned. There's a reason to be concerned in any time that anyone doesn't practice. Yep, thanks for that, Matt. We're aware. So ultimately, we don't really know what to make of this. This injury seemed to really just kind of crop up out of nowhere for Jaire. To go from limiteds to DNPs, not good. To add another injury to it, not good. But to only get a questionable tag, maybe. And as for whether Jaire playing matters a lot or not, of course it does, but especially going against Justin Jefferson. As the 33rd team posted Justin Jefferson's stats when Jaire Alexander is the nearest defender. Now, even though these two have been on division rival teams for years, they have not actually gone against each other that often due to various injuries between the two. Then there was a game where Joe buried, and Jaire was playing a lot of zone and wasn't really attached to Jefferson all that much. But when they've actually gone head-to-head, Justin Jefferson, 23 coverage snaps for Jaire. 5 targets, only 1 catch for 12 yards. And of course, the Jaire gritty over Justin Jefferson as well. Jaire Alexander is truly one of the better corners in the league at shutting down Jefferson, albeit in a small sample size. Him playing, especially with Jordan Addison returning for the Vikings, is actually fairly important. And then, going back to the injury report, and you got Jordan Love. So now the even bigger one, right? Again, listed as questionable in spite of 2 straight weeks of limited practices. We know the Packers will allow him to play or clear him when they feel as though there is no potential for causing substantial or more damage to that knee. That's always been their quarterback threshold. They haven't said as much, but that seemed to be the case with Rodgers, and it seems to be the case here. So we're again going to have to see. It wouldn't be shocking if he got another week of limited practices and then can't go, because the Packers have done that a ton before. But ultimately, we just don't know. You do have to believe, based upon Matt LaFleur saying that there has been progress this week, based upon even the little videos that the beat reporters put out, seems to be pretty positive. Dude seems to be moving pretty smoothly. We'll find out. Now, here's the thing. In regards to both the Jaire and Love injuries, the defensive matchup, you really don't like Jaire not being out there against Jefferson. But, like, they should be okay. It's just, you hate that matchup. If instead of Jaire, Valentine, Nixon, instead, if it becomes Stokes, Valentine, Nixon, no, that doesn't feel as good. Might they still be okay? Sure, but it becomes a lot more of an uphill battle. As for the offense, week 2, I said going into the Malik Willis time, even if they don't run against the Colts, because the Colts are going to sell out against it, then they should at least be functional. Well, then they ran anyway because the Colts didn't adjust at all. Okay, so then Malik Willis survived, right? Week 3, I said, okay, now we know Malik Willis can do some stuff. Let's open up the playbook again. And that's exactly what they did, and they cruised to a win over the Titans. And so, there's been faith all along in Malik Willis being able to operate the offense. However, I don't like this matchup as much for Malik Willis going against one of the league's best defenses and Brian Flores. The Vikings defense is red hot. They do a ton of ultra aggressive looks, and then you don't know if they're sending everyone or even out of that super aggressive look if they're going to go really light and Harrison Smith is going to drop way back. LaFleur even mentioned that in his press conference today. See, but Jordan Love going against that kind of defense has had success before. And even in week 1, going against disguised coverages, Jordan Love went against a really high rate against Philly and was one of the most successful quarterbacks against it in the NFL. If you're taking a look at that graphic there, the bottom line is the disguised coverage rate. You can see Jordan saw over 50% of his snaps be that, and still a very positive EPA. That would be the vertical column. And you might notice too, Malik Willis is there, but granted at a way smaller amount of disguised coverages over the last 2 weeks. Part of that is who they've gone against. Part of that is just they feel as though they can defend Malik Willis in a more straight up manner. Maybe they should have done more disguise, whatever. But that's where it rests. Jordan Love last year was one of the best QBs in the league going against pressure. He's one of the best in the league going against disguises, etc., etc. You can go on with the list. I'm just not sure at this time, in spite of what Malik Willis has shown, that I would trust that the offense would function at its fullest going against the most disguised and arguably most aggressive defense in the league. And there's reasons for that, and we're probably going to get to that in the rankings as to where the Viking defense actually falls. If Jaire can't go in this game, I like their chances just a little less. If Jordan can't go, I don't really love them, to be totally frank. So before we dive into some rankings, let's take a peek now at who these Minnesota Vikings are. Let's take a look at their depth chart. So you got Sam Darnold at quarterback. He have the 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions at this point on the year. Then running back, yeah, we know. Aaron Jones, he's coming back. Wide receivers, then you got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor. And Naylor's even had some great success this year that a lot of people didn't anticipate. Then tight end, Johnny Munt, Josh Oliver, of course, with TJ Hockenson, still unable to play. Tight end is a little bit of a black hole offensively for them. CJ Ham, still getting a bunch of work as the fullback. And then you get to their offensive line. Christian Darrisaw, Blake Brandel, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, and Brian O'Neill. Dalton Risner on IR there too. This offensive line, they're doing pretty well blocking the run. And if you want to talk about what they're doing pretty well with, it kind of stops there. Because this is not a good unit at blocking for the pass. It's just not. In fact, let's dive to this right now. You want to know where they're all ranked right now? This was taken from Jacob Morley on Twitter. He said, left tackle Christian Darrisaw, 7th. Or he's given up 7 pressures. 49 of 59 offensive tackles. Not good. Blake Brandel, left guard. Only given up 1. That's 2nd out of 63 guards. Garrett Bradbury, the center. He's given up 10. 32 of 33. Offensive centers, yeah, that's Kenny Clark's music right there. Ed Ingram, he's given up 10, 60 out of 63. And then Brian O'Neill has at least been serviceable, only giving up 5, but 39th out of 59th in terms of offensive tackles. This is not a good pass blocking group. And if you're wondering if that's going to come into play in just a little bit when I talk strategy, then let's take a look at their defense. You got Jaire Tillery, Harrison Phillips, and Jonathan Bullard is good to go for this game. That's their defensive line. Moving on to linebacker, Jonathan Greenard. Ivan Pace mentioned that he's out. Blake Cashman, Andrew Von Ginkel, they're going to play. Dallas Turner is good to go. He was one of the Vikings' first-round picks. Also notable, Kamu Gruder-Hill there. He is the most utilized replacement for Ivan Pace. At least he was last week. Expect to see a bunch of him. Then you get to the secondary, Stephon Gilmore, Harrison Smith. 2 oldies, but still 2 goodies. Cameron Bynum, Shaq Griffin, Byron Murphy Jr. rounding out the secondary. So there you go. That is the Minnesota Vikings depth chart. As for where that collective of guys happen to rank in the ever-important stats, let's just rattle these off. In terms of the run defense rankings, they are second in the NFL. They gave up only 71.3 yards per game on the ground. In terms of their pass defense rankings, 26th. And I feel like in all of the praise for Brian Flores, because they don't give up many points, but they do certainly give up yards to the air. 26th in the NFL, 239.3 yards per game through the air. And again, that's one reason that I don't love this matchup for the Malik Willis-led offense, because no matter what, even if you completely open up the playbook, even if you want Malik Willis to throw it 40 times, it still is going to be a more bottled up offense than that with Jordan Love, right? I don't think that's a questionable take, really. Well, the Vikings can be exposed when you do air it out against them. They're an incredibly good run defending team, even significantly better than the Titans, who they went against last week. So this is an offense that does have to spread it out a bit. I like Jordan Love to do that a lot more, and I do Malik Willis. In terms of points per game, they're second in the NFL. They're giving up only 10 points per game. In terms of red zone rankings, 7th in the NFL. They allow only 33% of the opposing offenses that march into the red zone to actually score touchdowns. The rest, field goals or turnovers. And we've covered it extensively before in prior videos. The Packers' offense in the red zone through all 3 weeks has been bad, real bad. One of the worst in the NFL. We're talking like worse than New England kind of bad. And now they're going against one of the best red zone defenses in the NFL. Yeah, don't really love that. Just to give you an idea of just how psychotic in some ways the Minnesota defense has been. And I talked about this a bit on Wednesday. The way that I think of the Vikings defense, the way that I've kind of come around to it, is it's a lot like, you know, when you're going against someone in Madden who doesn't really know what to do, and they just kind of flip through any play, right? And in real life, you got to consider like, okay, we have this personnel out there. They just did this. Let's do this, etc. Brian Flores is kind of like the Madden kid who's just throwing out anything. Right? As Brett Coleman notes here, 3 deep fire zones called all year, only 4. However, 2 deep or 4 deep, 25. The man is literally playing quarters with 1 less man and then daring you to throw it to the side flat 20 times a game until you go insane from boredom. And in spite of that, they're still giving up all those air yards. Right? And this I felt was even more notable. The second down blitz rate for the Vikings is a patently absurd 60%. They blitz on 60% of the second downs they go against. And even Brett Coleman says, what in tarnation? As for where the Vikings offense sits, the running offense, they're 13th in the NFL, getting 125 yards per game. Passing offense, 17th, 204.7 yards per game. Points per game, they're 3rd, 28.3. Red zone rank, 7th, 70%. That's where the Packers should be, but they're not. 70% of their chances get turned into touchdowns. Expect the Packers to improve there, but right now the Vikings are a lot better in that regard. In terms of the overall stats, turnover margin, they're 6th at a positive 0.7. Penalties, they're 16th in the NFL, getting only 6.3 per game. Again, much better than Green Bay in that regard, but Green Bay hopefully going to get better at that, right? Sacks given up, they give up 3 per game, and then sacks gotten, they get 5.3 sacks per game. So honestly, how do the Packers need to prepare for the Vikings offense? It sounds simplistic. I know, and it's never this easy, but I guess I would just boil it down to do it again. The Minnesota Vikings are quite Titans-like in a few different realms. One, the way that they like to run the ball, but then also, two, I'll put that up there again, in their offensive line, not being great at pass pro. And Sam Darnold, for as good as he's been, as I mentioned earlier, 8 touchdowns, 2 picks. Sam Darnold's been great for Minnesota. he still has a fairly glaring weakness. It just hasn't turned into turnovers yet. But still, his play is a lot worse when this occurs. He's been kept clean on 60% of his dropbacks, only 60%. And his time to throw on those dropbacks, a nice crisp 2.56. On those throws, he has a quarterback rating of over 127 and a 77% completion percentage. However, on the 40% of dropbacks that he's under pressure, his time to throw grows to 3.63 and his completion percentage drops nearly 30 points to 48%. In addition, his big time throw rate drops to only 3.7%, that's down nearly a full 2 ticks lower, and only 100 of his 650 passing yards thus far in the year, only about 100, have come while under pressure, despite that being 40% of his dropbacks. All of this basically spells out, get him under pressure, and there is a better than half chance that the ball is going to fall to the ground and be incomplete. No, he has not thrown any interceptions yet while under pressure, but still, incompletions are a good thing. Get him under pressure and you get some. Don't have him under pressure and he will quick you apart with quick throws. Worth noting too, he faces pressure on 40% of his dropbacks, but has only been blitzed on 20% of them. Teams have done a great job forcing pressure, and in large part because the offensive line is not great. In large part, they've been able to get pressure without having to blitz. Certainly could be a key for Green Bay with their aggressive front. Bring in the 4 horsemen front, Jeff. Bring it in. I'm all for it this game. As for how to stop Aaron Jones, who is having a great year, over 5 yards per carry thus far for Aaron Jones, honestly, we know how much Jones likes to do the zone. Again, this year, so many of his yards are coming from zone carries. I think they have to defend it much the same way that they did last week, which wasn't a lot of purposeful, just like we're out to stop the run. It was they just implemented a very attack front and then filled the lanes. Discipline is what will stop Aaron Jones in this game. If they revert back to how they were like week 1 against Philly, and I know it was a slip and slide, but if they do that again, then Aaron Jones will make them pay. If they stay disciplined in their lanes, they should be able to stifle the Minnesota run game. As for the Packers offense, as has been the case for several weeks, it's tough to even really guess as to what's going on because it's going to depend so much of who is at quarterback. Like if it's Jordan Love, the word that I keep coming back to is bamboozle him back, right? Because the Vikings defense we covered how it just makes no sense, and yet it's so good. Well, I would say offensively, confuse them back, right? They're so hard to do because you never know what they're going to do out of these base alignments. Well, the Packers, for LaFleur, this is where the illusion of complexity that he talks about all the time needs to take center stage. Also, in the Malik Willis weeks, I say we learn from that because they've implemented a bunch of single back option, almost high school style looks at times over the last couple of weeks, some wing back stuff making an appearance. I would say, again, even with Love is in, roll them out. Maybe just diversify the play calls from those sets. Hell, throw in a wildcat package with Malik Willis. Frankly, Malik Willis has earned it. And obviously, there are limits here, right? I don't need to go over the top because ultimately, the way that you really beat Minnesota is by catching them through the air. And I know it's not this simple, but this is what I truly perceive to be the key. Mirror Minnesota's unpredictableness with your own. And when Minnesota falls back, because one of the things that they do when their stuff doesn't work is then they fall back to over-aggression. And that is when Jordan Love can truly take advantage with a deep ball against what is still ultimately a good, not great, secondary for Minnesota. If it is Willis, though, then I say you just go back to the Novocaine plan from Remember the Titans. Only so many plays, just do them perfect, and they work every time. There is no defense for great blocking and perfect execution. And that may be what it takes if Malik Willis is at quarterback, paired with risk-averse QB play, which we know Malik Willis has become downright an expert in the last couple of weeks. Don't make anything easy for this Minnesota defense. And by the way, they are getting 5.3 sacks a game. They're up to 16 on the year. Rasheed Walker needs to have a strong game against Minnesota's front. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't necessarily love this matchup for where Green Bay is right now. If we were to zoom ahead, maybe later in the year when these two teams, maybe we're looking at a healthier picture, or if this were week 1, I do really like how Green Bay lines up against Minnesota. But right now, you've got maybe Jordan Love coming back. And is he going to be full go, or will there be some rust? I think, as I talked about on Wednesday, I think the chances of rust are mitigated by the fact that he's gotten in all of these limited practices. But still, there'll inevitably be at least a little bit, right? The offense is going to have to adapt back to its roots as opposed to what they've been doing the last couple of weeks. And then defensively, is Jaire going to go or not? Is it going to be Jaire and Stokes and Nixon? Or is it going to be Stokes and Ballantyne and Nixon? Or are they going to kick Nixon out on the boundary and then have Bullard slide into the slot? See what I mean? Given what's going on here, given the depth concerns at corner now, if Jaire can't go, it starts getting real questionable for the Green Bay Packers. And maybe the pressure will still be enough, and they don't need an all-world secondary back there, but still, you'd love to have it, right? The interesting roster wrinkle that I talked about earlier is, keep in mind, Sean Clifford has already been elevated twice. Well, the Packers get 2 practice squad elevations total for game day, and then a guy can be elevated 3 times on the year. Well, Clifford, they've used up 2 of those already. Plus, Rochelle, they've used up 1, Robert Rochelle, the top corner that they like to call up. Well, if Valentine can't go and Jaire can't go, then I'm sure the Packers would love to use both of those elevations on 2 corners. Maybe Rochelle again, maybe Kalen King, give some support in the slot. But if Love also can't go, well, then one of those elevations is going to have to go to Sean Clifford, and it's his last one. So does that mean that then they got to put Jordan Morgan on IR in order to elevate Clifford to the 53, and then, see what I mean? It is a pretty quick trickle-down effect for the Packers roster. Meanwhile, you take a look at the Vikings side of the field, and, well, Ivan Pace Jr. is going to miss the game. That's it. And that, pretty much everyone's back, or good to go. So I don't love this matchup for where these 2 teams are catching each other right now. With that being said, Green Bay still, if they follow their keys, still could ultimately win. I just think in this case, in this circumstance, if Jaire can't go, if Jordan can't go, whatever, even if they can but they're limited, okay. I just think that this one tilts a little bit towards Minnesota, and it's an uphill battle for Green Bay. So given that, logic dictates I got to give this one to Minnesota. First time this year, 24-17 ultimately for Minnesota, but so much of this game is going to be determined by who actually plays. And I hope I'm wrong in this prediction. Reminder, no watch party on Sunday. I'm taking the day off to actually watch a game with my family, and then I'll be back on Monday with shout-outs and get-outs. No content for me on Sunday. Do hope you enjoy the game. Remember, it's on CBS, not Fox. Feels like it should be on Fox, but this one's on CBS. So enjoy catching the game. Have fun watching it. And as always, go Pack, go.